Hello, you're watching A News. I'm Bakir Sanova, and let's see the top stories. U.S. President Donald Trump urged Hamas and Israel to move forward on Gaza peace plan. Peru's Gen Z rallies against President Boluarte, protesting over pensions and corruption. And Syria goes to the polls for the first time since Assad's fall. U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday that Israel has agreed to an initial withdrawal line for Gaza, which has also been shared with Hamas. In a post on Truth Social, he added that a ceasefire would take effect immediately once Hamas confirms the plan. The announcement also paves the way for a prisoner exchange and sets the stage for the next phase of Israel's withdrawal from the territory. Massive protests erupted in Tel Aviv on Saturday as Israelis called for a ceasefire in Gaza. The demonstrations come as hopes rise over a U.S.-led plan involving Israel and Hamas.
Tens of thousands of Israelis gathered in Tel Aviv on Saturday to demand a ceasefire in Gaza and the immediate release of hostages. Protesters carried banners calling on the government to seal the deal. Some participants voiced distrust in Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while expressing hope in US President Donald Trump's involvement.
So we came here today because there are finally some very positive signs that a ceasefire will be signed and the hostage deal will take place, releasing the hostages and finishing the hostilities in Gaza. We know that President Trump has been pushing it.
Actually, we're here almost every night for the last 729 days, every Saturday night and sometimes during the weeknights too. We are anxious for the kidnapped to be released. We are anxious to stop the war. It's been way too long since we've commenced on this terrible war. And we could have finished it long ago.
Hamas on Friday accepted key parts of Trump's plan, including a ceasefire, Israel's withdrawal, and the release of hostages and Palestinian captives. Following this, Netanyahu's office said Israel was preparing for immediate implementation of the first stage of the deal, sending a negotiation team to Cairo for final discussions.
Hundreds of Peruvians took to the streets of Lima on Saturday to protest against President Dina Boluarte's government, voicing anger over corruption, economic woes, and rising crime. Organized by the youth group Gen Z, the demonstration saw mostly young protesters rally outside Congress with banners condemning violence and extortion. Similar protests in recent weeks, joined by transport and merchant unions, have occasionally turned violent. Public frustration has intensified over corruption allegations, worsening living conditions, and a lack of accountability for protesters killed by security forces since Boluarte took office in late 2022. Gen Z is taking to the streets like never before. From Nepal to Morocco and Madagascar, young people are using digital platforms to organize, share their experiences, and amplify their demands.
Throughout history, many years have been defined by powerful protests, but 2025 seems to be writing a new chapter. It is emerging as the year of Gen Z movements, a global wave of youth-led action demanding change and challenging authority. One of the strongest waves began in Nepal. A government ban on 26 social media platforms sparked outrage over corruption, nepotism, and lack of opportunity. Within 48 hours, thousands of protesters flooded the capital Kathmandu. Iconic buildings went up in flames, the parliament burned, and Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli resigned. By the end, 74 people were dead and over 2,100 injured. With social networks blocked, protesters shifted to the chat app Discord. The platform went so far that even the country's interim Prime Minister, former Judge Sushila Karki, was chosen through an online vote. Protesters carried flags and posters depicting anime characters, a symbol that has now become a unifying emblem for youth movements across countries. In Morocco, Gen Z frustration boiled over as billions were poured into 2030 FIFA World Cup preparations, while schools and hospitals lagged behind. The online group Gen Z 212 organised protests that spread from Rabat to Casablanca. Banks were ransacked, cars burned, and streets littered with overturned vehicles. At least 2 people were killed, hundreds injured, and more than 400 arrested. Across the Indian Ocean, Madagascar's youth mobilized against power outages and water shortages. Hundreds marched through cities calling for President Andry Rajoelina's resignation and the overhaul of government institutions. According to UN estimates, at least 22 were killed and more than 100 injured in the opening days. In response, Rajoelina dissolved his government and promised dialogue, but organizers warned that the movement would return stronger. These youth movements have been inspiring each other across borders. Young people are sharing strategies, creating hashtags, editing videos, and posting updates to support fellow activists around the world. Now, calls for action are spreading to new countries, with more young people preparing to take to the streets. Experts say 2025 could go down as the year of the Gen Z protest, marking a generation ready to challenge governments and shape the future.
For political analyst Diogo Castro Silva, these uprisings are the result of the fragmentation of power that is occurring throughout the world.
What is happening and has been happening for some time is a fragmentation of power, the difficulty of exercising power. And that is not only exclusive of the political realm, although it expresses itself more strongly perhaps in the political realm, but you can see that evidence on CEOs having difficulties to having the average tenure of CEOs has diminished. So all the positions of power have is much more harder to hold to them. And this is because society itself is fragmenting, and their social media is critical technology, anxiety about many changes which are significant if you take climate change, AI, and everything. So this century has been an expression for some time of protests. One can remember the Occupy Wall Street, then the Arab Spring, and especially with social media, protests that can be easily have a contagion effect. Social media allows a much cheaper way to organize, to coalesce people, and this has been a trademark not only of these protests, but of some protests before. And if these protests now are of the Discord and other apps, the protests of the Arab Spring were of the Twitter. So what you are seeing is the use of these tools and everything to better organize. And of course, and the powers, be it them autocracy or democracies, having a lot of difficulty to address the issues raised, because the issues raised, and getting into your question, they are specific of each country. They have some common themes like corruption, like other themes, but they are not, it's not easy to address from the part of the political system.
Preliminary results from the Czech Republic's parliamentary elections show former Prime Minister and billionaire businessman Andrej Babiš leading the vote. With nearly all ballots counted, his Ano party is on course to win about 35%, translating into roughly 80 seats in the 200-member lower house. Final official results are yet to be confirmed, and coalition talks are already underway.
Billionaire businessman and former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš has won the Czech Republic's parliamentary elections, marking a political comeback after 4 years in opposition. Preliminary results show his populist ANO party leading with just under 35% of the vote, securing 80 seats in the 200-seat parliament, but still short of an outright majority. Babiš hailed the result as a historic success and the peak of his political career. He entered the stage dancing to an Italian pop hit from the 1980s, a moment both triumphant and theatrical. But behind the celebration lies a complex coalition puzzle. To form a government, Babiš will need partners. He's begun talks with two small right-wing parties, the Freedom and Direct Democracy movement and Motorists for themselves, both skeptical of the European Union's green agenda and critical of immigration. Together, they could secure a parliamentary majority, but tensions remain especially over foreign policy. He says the scheme lacks transparency, though officials defend it as one of the EU's most effective. Still, Babiš insists Prague will remain a reliable partner within NATO.
A Russian strike laid on Saturday on Ukraine's southeastern city of Zaporizhia killed one person and injured 9, according to officials. The attack caused significant damage with apartment blocks and houses hit, cars burned, and windows shattered. Over 73,000 residents were left without power following the strike. The Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, located about 55 kilometers southwest of the city and under Russian control, has remained cut off from external power since last week. The death toll from the collapse of an Islamic boarding school in Indonesia has risen to 36, up from 16 the previous day, the country's disaster agency said. Rescue efforts continue on the 7th day to find 27 students still missing, mostly boys aged 13 to 19, trapped under the rubble. Cranes are being used and 60% of the search and clearance work has been completed. The agency expects all debris to be cleaned by Monday. The incident occurred on 29th of September in Sidoarjo, East Java, when the school's foundations could not support ongoing construction on the upper floors, causing the building to collapse on hundreds of students during afternoon prayers. Syria is holding its first parliament vote since the fall of Bashar al-Assad, making a significant step in the country's rebuilding process. 2/3 of the seats will be indirectly elected, while the remainder will be appointed by the interim president.
Syria holds an indirect vote on the 5th of October to form its first parliament since the ousting of Bashar al-Assad. The process has raised concerns over political inclusivity in the country. The vote comes as the country rebuilds after 14 years of war and recent clashes in Swida. 2/3 of the 210-seat parliament will be chosen by electoral colleges of around 6,000 voters, representing different regions. A committee appointed by President Ahmed al-Sharaa has approved 1,570 candidates. The remaining third of the seats will be directly appointed by al-Sharaa himself. Authorities say a nationwide vote is not feasible due to a lack of accurate population data and the displacement of millions of Syrians during the war. Elections have been postponed in Kurdish-controlled areas in the northeast and in the Druze-majority province of Swida, leaving 19 seats vacant. Critics describe the process as partly indirect and say it does not reflect the will of the people. In Deir ez-Zor, for example, the western part of the city will hold elections under government control, while the eastern part, under Kurdish control, will not vote. Some critics also argue that women and religious or ethnic minorities are underrepresented. Female candidates make up 20% in only a quarter of constituencies and less than 10% in half of them. No quotas exist for women or minority groups. However, during the Assad era, representation was even lower. Between 1981 and Assad's removal, women held just 6 to 13% of seats. At that time, Parliament had 250 members, 2/3 of whom belonged to the Ba'ath Party. The last elections, in July 2024, were dismissed as a political show by Assad's opponents. The new People's Assembly will mainly be tasked with updating old laws, passing new legislation, drafting a constitution, and preparing for direct elections within the next 3 to 5 years.
Earlier, we spoke with Lamis Jadid, an expert on Middle Eastern affairs, who said that this is a crucial moment for Syria.
It's a very crucial moment for Syria history, this step, I believe, parliamentarian election for a government that was assigned itself to the country. It will give more legitimacy to the government, of course, if it went as for all Syrian aspiration now, for being. Syria is being, even if not geographically, but it's not under the control of the government. We have the northeast, it's under the Kurdish control, SDF. We have the south under the Israeli control now. We don't know about the Druze, how they will vote. We have a distrust between the west of the country, the Alawite region, and the government. So we are speaking about crucial moment for the country, for the government, for the people. And we hope that it will include, not exclude, the Syrians. We know, for example, the Kurdish eternal problem is that they don't have a Syrian identity, for example. They wanted always to be Syrian, and until today they are not considered to be Syrian. And the government in Damascus, they have doubts if any election will happen under the control of the SDF. Is it going truly to be equally representing all the Kurdish voices? So there is trust, and this is between parties. Yes, it will really to a good place for Syria history. Just if there is some goodwill behind the government action, behind the president, what the president truly meant from the legislation of this election, because until today, what we know is third part of the elected parliamentarians, they will be assigned by him, and the other 2/3, they will be assigned by a council that will be assigned by him, and this council has the right to choose people they know and they approve to be the good Syrian or the Syrians that got the trust of the regime in Damascus. So we are recycling, in a way, an old regime, but in an Islamic version that might not give the power to the people, but the whole power is in the hand of God. And the wilaya, it's the representative of God in a political way, let's say it, in the parliament. So it's some kind of shura, it's a council of shura where they could counsel themselves and where they could decide for the future of the country.
Kaha Kaladze, candidate of the ruling Georgian Dream Party, has won the Tbilisi mayoral election. According to the Central Election Commission, with 100% of ballots counted, Kaladze received 71.6% of the vote. Opposition candidate Irakli Kupradze of Strong Georgia and Gakaria for Georgia came second with 12.3%, while Lago Kvichia of the Liberation Party, Gyurchi, took third place with 7.6%. The vote was held amid heightened public scrutiny and protests in the capital. With this result, Kaladze retains his post as Tbilisi's mayor, a position he has held since 2017. Thank you for joining me. That's your news update for now. Make sure you stay tuned to A News for more updates.